Welcome, everyone, to Wired for Wonder. My name is Lori Kirkland, and I'm excited to be joined today with Robert Buckley, who is the Chief People Architect at Inveda Biosciences. And we're here today to talk with forward thinkers, leaders who are thinking about the human side of all the change that's going on and what we need to do. What are some of the ideas and topics we need to be thinking about to get ourselves future ready? So, Robert, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very glad to be here and have a good chat.
So, you have the title of Chief People Architect, which is one of my favorites. And I kind of like your approach to it, that you don't see the people side just as right soft skills only, that there's actually some systematic ways of building culture. You want to give us just a little bit of a background about how you ended up in this role and kind of what you're most passionate about?
One of the really great things about the field of HR is that if you want to, you can do lots of different things. And sure, there's always unique things about a given industry or sector that you have to pay attention to. It's also true that a lot of it crosses. And there's HR stuff that goes on in every organization that's similar and stuff that's different. My number one strength on Strength Finders is learner. I love learning. I love failing. I love doing different things. I love trying out. I love building. And so when the opportunity came to join biotech, which I had not been in, I definitely raised my hand and jumped at it. And this is like my 12th industry in my career. So I love it.
All right. So what's something as a learner, what's something you've learned about jumping to an industry you hadn't been in?
Well, you have to. I had a friend ask me one time because I change jobs and do these different industries. And he's like, "Yeah, so what do you do, Robert? You just show up and open up your playbook and here we go." I said, "No, definitely not. Definitely not. I come with all this experience and knowledge and learnings from very different industries. And I say, what applies in this job and what doesn't apply? And there are things that don't apply. And that's fine. That's a good thing. Like, be wise about it. But I definitely do not come thinking I already know all the answers. That's the whole reason to go to someplace new, is so that you're forced to learn and fail and grow and build and take all the things you already know and the stuff you're going to learn."
And you're actually touching on something that's really relevant with all the changes AI is bringing,
Yeah.
which is everything that you knew not coming with all the answers. And that's
Yeah.
that's a different leadership style, right? If you think of hierarchical and traditional operating models for companies, it's that the leaders know all the answers. What would you say to people who are wanting to expand their own mindset to be able to kind of embrace the fluidity that you do when you move from company to, or industry to industry?
I think as a leader, that's very powerful in realizing you don't have all the answers. It's a good thing. And this is actually one of the things when I talk to people who want to be people leaders. I was just having this conversation. I was in our lab just last week. Yeah. And someone said, "Hey, can I chat with you?" And I said, "Of course." And this person's thinking about being a people leader. And one of the pieces of advice I gave this person, and I do everybody, is one, remember, you don't have all the answers. We are not putting you in this job as a people leader at whatever level. You can be C-suite or you can be first line, because you know all the answers. And when I do leadership development, I have this curated curriculum we built inside Inveda and how we think about leadership development, and happy to chat about that too. One of the classes is, how do I ask for help? We do an entire class on how do I ask for help. And this is the beginning point, is that you should not think you have all the answers. And people do it for a variety of reasons, Lori. Sometimes they do it because it's like a power thing. But actually not most people. Most people just feel like, I really want to do a good job. And geez, they put me in this job. So that must mean I have to be the smartest person and know all the answers. And if I don't know all the answers, then that means I'm probably failing and I'm going to get fired. And I'm trying to tell these people, no, you're not. Hire people around you, ask your peers, ask other people in the organization for help. And that's how you're going to be successful.
That's so interesting. And it does feel very opposite. And I agree with you. Like, having worked at big corporate, Fortune 500 companies, to many like you across industries in my management consulting experience, I've learned that I don't really think that there's like any leader is really trying to be a bad leader. Like, yes, there's a couple of bad eggs, but over my 20 years, like I would say 95%, 98% are just people trying to do their best. But then there's this like expectation, or it's unwritten though. It's often unwritten, right? That you need to know the answers. But again, going back to the times of AI is we're entering a point where you can't know all the answers. You can't know. I can't know. We're all in this learning together. But that can leave leaders feeling a little bit lonely, right? What would you recommend, or what is one of your tips from maybe your classes that
Yeah.
you could give our listeners that would be like, do this, start doing it today, start practicing this skill so that as we go into more uncertainty in times of change, you're actually up leveling your own human skills.
Just yesterday, we had a leadership development class, and it was not how do I ask for help? It was a different one. And I gave this tip. It just naturally came up in class. And I think this is the answer. So here's what I try to do. Even when people come to me in HR, because it's like, an HR thing, so you got to talk HR.
Scary, right?
Scary. I do my best almost always. If it's a super sensitive issue, obviously I'm a little more direct on what I'm about to tell you, but almost always I don't answer the question that I get asked. Instead, the tip is, I think if you want to be a great people leader, be a great interlocutor. Be a great questioner. An interlocutor is a person who asks questions. And so when people leaders come to me on almost all topics, I almost never answer their question. Instead, I'll say, hey, Lori, okay, have you thought about this? Hey, Lori, what is the data telling you? Have you done any data digging? Lori, sometimes the data doesn't matter. It's just like, what's the context going on here? Hey,
Mm,
Lori, have you asked anybody else? Hey, have you thought about? And if you can be a really great questioner, almost all the time, the person already knows the answer. They just don't know they know the answer. And if you can be a great interlocutor and draw it out of them, that after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is, that person goes, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Thank you. And I said,
interlocutor.
you're welcome.
Is that how you say
Interlocutor.
it?
Yeah. Just a
Interlocutor.
great questioner.
It
Just
is.
a great
I know,
questioner.
but it's a really fun word too.
It
So
is.
I
Yeah.
like it. I like it. But that's
Yeah.
actually really great. I have a design thinking background. The curiosity mindset
Yeah.
matches up right with that. And
That's
having done a lot of digital transformation, I understand that the people systems are really usually the biggest and hardest part of change that
right.
happens. So it's moving those people along the path with you.
Yeah.
Asking questions is the fastest way to get, because everybody's always trying to give you the answer that you think.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes as human beings, we miss that nobody else is in our mind. Nobody else is in the exact same context we are.
Right.
Um,
Well, I'll give you one other way to think about this too. A reason this is good is we often think about how do you scale an organization? And most of the time you're thinking of processes or tools. And that's fine. That's not a good thing. We should think about that. What we don't talk about enough is how do you scale people,
yeah.
specifically people leadership? And the answer is not just hire more people. The answer is not work them more hours so they get all burned out and quit. The answer is actually what we're talking about. Train your people leaders to solve their own problems. And instead of me answering their questions, me pulling it out of them, I'm scaling them because now they have these models and ideas on how to solve problems. So when an employee comes to them the next time, they don't need to come talk to me. We don't need an army of HR and finance and legal people if we have really great people leaders. And the way to scale them is to train them to think like this, use one another, plus HR, still come to HR when you need to. But if they can do all of that and learn to answer those questions and be great questioners themselves, think how much scale we've given in the organization.
I mean, that is like music to my ears. Cause again, I think that people are our most valuable asset in any organization. And they're one that's often overlooked for efficiency and numbers and productivity on P&Ls. And they're in most companies today are skipping that point of like, hey, you have a really big team of problem solvers, but you're just asking them to do
Yep.
only these standardized processes. So let me ask you, if we were thinking about, the future of work, right, which we're embracing a change in the workplace,
Yeah.
and things like standardization and process, of course they have to still be in place. And you have your ideal scenario, but how would you recommend leaders start letting go of standardization and process only to be able to actually start focusing on their people more?
So the framework we use a lot at Inveda is people, process, structure. And so when we think about a given issue, and we can talk about some examples if that would be helpful,
Sure.
how do we think in those three pillars? What's the best structure we should have in place? That doesn't mean it can't change in a year, 6 months, 3 years, whatever. How do we build solid processes? Because we shouldn't be against standardization. What we
Yeah.
should be against is only standardization. And that's the language you use, which I
Mhm.
totally agree with. And then how do we think about the people? Maybe we have the wrong talent for what the world is going to be. Okay, should we fire them? Maybe. Maybe we should train them. Maybe we should retrain them. Maybe we should give people more time and context. There's lots of different answers given in a given situation. But there are other models we could use, but people process structure is a helpful one to answer that question.
I like that, but I like that you have people at the forefront, which is what.
Yes.
Yes, you can't put the process at the forefront, and that's a mindset shift. I mean, we have all been working in, I call it production line thinking. I'm a Michigan girl, so I always think of like Henry Ford, right? The
Yeah,
production line.
love it.
But right, we've been working in our industries for a long time like that. But it is a shift in mindset to start looking at, like, actually, are your people wrong? No, or is it that you're being too prescriptive of the processes and the structure, and you're not being willing to change when you learn something, right? When you learn something from your people that maybe part of your standardized process is actually not working, or it's creating more inefficiencies. And I think that individual contributors feel like that, leaders feel like that, like we all feel like, oh, wait, but we finally got that problem settled. We don't want to change again. What's some advice you'd give to people who are, you're trying to make a switch over, trying to let go as much as they can of the complete control, but are starting to think about putting people more at the center of their business?
Well, let me start with my brand, and then I'll give you two examples on both sides of that. So, my brand is people create all value. People
Mm,
create all value. So, no value gets created that's not done by people. But there are some people who do not create any value. Okay, so people create all value. Well, once you say, okay, I get that, then that leads you to things you're going to do and you're not going to do in your company culture or in HR or whatever. So, two examples for you. So, on the standardization side, we believe that hiring is like manufacturing. Michigan girl.
mhm.
So we have this whole defined, data driven, very structured, robust hiring process. And we have all kinds of metrics about how it performs. And we love math and data over here at Inveda. I do a lot of it in the HR team. So we know how it's working. That's an area where you are better off having a very defined and followed process because of biases and efficiency and effectiveness, all kinds of reasons, which we can talk about the details. So that's over here. On this side, though, we do not believe at Inveda in treating everybody equal. We don't. We should not. In fact, I don't think we should treat people equal. What we should do is treat people fair.
Mm,
And sometimes the most fair thing you can do is equal. And there's examples for that. And sometimes the most fair thing you could do is not equal. Here's the problem. Everybody loves to say, oh, we treat everybody equal. But you give up two super valuable things when you say that. One, you give up your ability to be merciful. And two, you give up your ability to be generous. And
mm.
at our core, people create all value. We don't want to give up those things. It sounds good to say everybody's equal, but actually, we don't want to treat everybody equal. We want to give Lori what's amazing for Lori and want to give Robert what's amazing for Robert. And if that's the same, great. And if it's not, it's okay. Now, there are times, like I said, where everything has to be equal. But when you think about how you interact with employees, do we really want to be equal? Or do we want to say, let's say you and I have the same manager, and let's say that manager's name is Jane. Do you want Jane to treat us equal, or do both of us really want Jane to treat us as humans? And I get what I need out of work. You get what you need out of work, but they're different. So it's not equal, but we both get what we want. What
Mm.
would we rather have? I think we
Hands
know.
down, right? The second one. I mean, I think, right, going back to even the name of the podcast, right? Wired from Wonder. We as humans are wired for connection. We're
We
wired for
are.
purpose. We're meant to be thinking about something bigger. And so I love that point. It's so refreshing because when I get treated and seen as what my special gifts are, right? Not
Yes.
treated special, but like given work and tasks that align with what I'm good with.
Right.
And then you also get that, all of a sudden there's room for both of us to win. And there's not that kind of mindset of, there's only one pie and if you get it, I don't, right? If
Right.
if a leader really is working on more of their coaching and more of their guidance and what's right for each individual, what you're then creating is, right, people who are aligned with the things that they're good with so they get to feel good
Right.
and they can see what their coworkers good at, and all of a sudden there's not competition. Instead
No.
it's like, oh my god, let me help you, I can do this without thinking about it, and they can
Right.
do the same. And here's the other thing, Robert, like, isn't that how you interact when you're having a beer with your neighbors? Like, you're not in competition with them. But
No.
for some reason, why do we do that at work? Why is it that,
You
like,
know
all of a
why?
sudden we have these barriers about who you can be?
Because we have this weird thing that says, well, if I do it for one person, I have to do it for another. And you hear this over and over and over.
Mm,
And we've been trained over the decades or whatever in work, last 100 years, whatever we want to call it, to think that that's probably a good way to imagine. And it's not that it's all bad. There are some parts where we should think like that, but that's this much. This much is treat everybody as an individual. And so we take the little thing and make it the big thing. And most of the time, what employees do, and you know this, Lori, is they cheer for their teammate. If you
yes.
get something that I don't get, but I know it's something you value, I don't pout. I go, that's awesome. The company thinks that much of Lori, our boss, did that for her. You'll
Mhm.
get 1 out of 100. That's it. And then what companies also do wrong is they say, well, we're going to punish the 99 for the one. For the one person
Yes.
who does
Oh,
something wrong, we're going to write 10 pages of policy and then we take away your good thing, Lori. And we shouldn't do that. We should deal with the one and still celebrate and give the 99 to make it amazing.
well, and it's interesting because just as a human being, like, one of my biggest motivating things is autonomy, right? Like, I am a problem solver, so give me something, juicy and complex, and I'm not a thinker, like a linear thinker of A, B, C, D. I'm like, oh, two cartwheels and a
Yeah.
somersault, and guess what? I found an answer that's way faster, way more efficient,
Yep.
and we jumped ahead. But you're right, when we take some situation that happened and we try to just get rid of it all the way, we get rid of more than that one situation. We
A
get rid of
hundred
chunks.
times more.
And that really does resonate with me, because I can see, having worked at large corporations, where, man, people's joy has just been sucked out of them.
It has been. And, I think some companies don't think as much as they should, but I think most of the time companies think it's like, well, we're doing good because we're treating everybody the same. And what they realize is they've taken all the joy out of work. Remember, do you want to lose generosity and mercy? We don't. And
Mhm.
even if you told managers this is the policy and this is what they have to do, most of them will violate it because they care about generosity and mercy. So
Yeah.
at Inveda, what we do is we celebrate those people. We say,
Mm.
thank you, manager, for doing that. Maybe we do it different next time, maybe not. But even if it was next time do it different, we celebrate because they cared and they made a decision and they moved forward and they weren't stuck in some stupid HR policy booklet thing.
Right? Like, people make decisions as if they're forever. And I'm sorry, but we're, as humans, everything is always changing. We are literally
Always.
adaptive machines, right? Like,
Yes.
every breath I'm taking, I've learned something about the temperature, the heat, the time. So,
Yeah.
but somehow at work, we're like, no, that doesn't happen.
Right.
And then it leaves some people in pain, which is really frustrating. But in the same sense, it feels like there's this opportunity in HR, to expand that thinking, right? Like, to really start. I like your term celebrating, right? But to really start noticing individuals And I don't know if this is at all related, but this is where my mind is going. I'm seeing a connection between many people saying they don't feel like they have a growth path in their company,
Yeah.
right? And that
Yep.
is because they've got this and this. But what you're talking about is potentially an opportunity for me to be celebrated as a leader for what I do, which could make me feel like growth and could be get me recognized for things that are different than other people. So while it may not look like a growth path on an HR or on a hierarchical chain, it does allow people to still grow within their role and learn and continue. What do you think of that?
The way we talk about career development at Invada is it all counts. 3 words, super simple. It all counts. And what we talk about is that growth is not this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that can't be part of it. Of course, people want to be promoted. Of course, people want to be paid more and in higher levels.
We all
That's
do.
fine. But that's, again, we focus on the small. The large part of career and learning is all the other stuff. Read a book, podcast. Let's talk about AI. We love talking about AI. How do you get better at that skill? I've been having conversations over the last few weeks with people inside HR and outside HR at Invada about what do you want to learn? What do you want to develop? How do you want to grow? Remember, I met with that person last week who's thinking about being a people leader. Awesome. Let's talk about it. And then there are people who don't. They're like, dude, those humans are weird. That's the first thing I tell people, Lori. I'm like, do you know humans are weird? You're going to have to talk to them more,
I
and they
mean, and
just want to
that's
do other stuff. And that's great.
future though, especially where we have machines who are going to be taking who could take some of the standardized processes we've been talking about and replace that. You are going to have more skills. Now maybe it's in the data analytics and it's into
Right.
data science and you get
Right.
creative into that,
Right.
or into coding and solving bigger problems that were never even been solved before, right? Or there is going to be a people component where either you're growing
Always. Yeah.
or it's managing people, which is going to be way more coaching, because with the speed and the order of magnitude that AI is bringing, it's like you can't keep up in traditional methods of I have a check-in once a week.
Right.
Like
Think
there's
of your
too much growth.
classic principal engineer. That engineer, she doesn't have anybody who reports to her, but she is in charge of the entire architect of that project.
Mm-hmm.
Massive influence, massive thinking, tons of career growth. And so that's just one example, but all of your examples are all true too. And so get what we coach people and talk is, what does it all count? And also there are seasons in your life, and we should not forget this.
Yeah.
It does, when you have little children, your life is different than when you have adult children. When you have no children, your life is different. Maybe you have a sick parent. Maybe you have other things going on in your life. And so what we try to say at Invada is we want you as a people leader, because people create all value. Your job's here's another thing we believe. People leaders are the fulcrum of every organization. It's totally
Mm-hmm.
true. And I can share some data about that if you want. But people leaders are the fulcrum. So we coach our people leaders to say, what's going on in your life, Lori? You don't have to tell me all the details, but how can I help you grow? And if you're at
Yeah.
a season in your life where you're just like, can I just get my work done? Because this is going on with my kid and we're trying to figure all this stuff out. Our
Yeah.
answer is yes. If you say, oh my gosh, I am so excited. I definitely want to be promoted to director next year. Our answer is absolutely, let's get you there. And so take all of those things into account, help people be where they're at, contextualize it. Maybe the best thing you can do is take a class that is like
Yeah.
online on Udemy. Maybe the best thing is to go to a conference. Maybe the best thing is to read a bunch of books and let's talk about it. Maybe fill in the blank. But if you have that kind of open, it all counts mindset, you're treating the person as human because they may or may not have stuff going on in their life that helps them do or not do. And then you're also not limiting it to just this linear next step.
I love that. I love that. And so now really thinking about disruption in the HR space and AI, what's one area that if you're like, this is so ripe for disruption, that you would say you would give if people are thinking about building an AI product? What's something in HI and excuse me, not HI, in HR that AI could potentially, like, what's an area for a big, a current problem that's going on that you think could be interesting if it was disruptive?
Well, you've probably figured out already on this podcast that I think first in principles, not in work, but in principle. There's no sense doing something, whatever that something is, if it's not tied to a bigger principle. Then you're sort of just like moving around doing stuff. So I will give you an answer, but my first piece of advice is, what's your principle? And so when we think about AI, don't just go do something. How do you try to solve a real problem? So I'll tell you the rubric we've come up with: activation energy. We look around and we say, where do we struggle with our people leaders to get activation energy? Because people leaders are the fulcrum. So our focus is, how do we help you, Lori, the people leader, be amazing at your job? Because if you're amazing, all the stuff we started on the podcast talking about coaching and other stuff, all will be well in the organization. And so we look around and we say, where do people leaders struggle? So let's just start at the beginning. Recruiting. How hard is it to get managers to go through their queue when they finally do an interview, type their feedback? How hard is it to get then when all the documentation that you need in order to launch a job? Because again, we have this really robust, hiring process. That's where they struggle. They're not against it. They're just struggle. It's a lot. So we have built AI tools where there's activation energy problems so that we reduce all that. So now, I'll give you one example. This great process we had when we first launched, it took 7 days to launch a job. And some of that was just newness. We got all that down by learning how to do things well to 3 days. Oh, that's not bad.
Very nice.
With AI, we're at 3 minutes.
I love
We've gone
that.
from 7 days to 3 minutes.
I mean, I can tell you, I remember 6 months of like getting a job launched, and you're like, well, I'm almost done with that.
With the work that the person was going to do anyways. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So that's another example is in onboarding. So we put a lot of emphasis on having a great onboarding program. And same thing. Well, how do you write all the docs and get ready and all the emails and da-da-da-da-da? So we built all these AI tools to take all of that work off the manager's plate to start. Because what we believe at Enveda is about an 80-20 rule. AI should get you about 80% of the way there, but you still need a human. Do not, in any place in the science or in HR or in finance, say, well, I put it into chat and therefore here's the answer. If you, the human, have not done your job to make sure that data is right, then that's your problem. And
I love that. And just thinking about, right, we at DeepHumanX, we work a lot with companies enabling them to use AI. And that's probably one of the biggest things where that comes up is people are worried about being so replaced. The minute you start incorporating, like really augmenting with AI, you realize quickly the limits of the technology, but actually how important the humanness
it is
becomes, like, because you're thinking, your critical thinking, your review, your intuition, right? We've kind of nixed intuition and that gut feeling from the workplace, but all of a sudden it's like, no, this is back. If something isn't reading right, it actually is that human intuition who will, more of our subconscious will capture patterns that the technology didn't, because it doesn't have the same evolutionary patterns.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there's still a place for human connection. There's still a place for human review. There's still a place for human creativity and how you want to write it. And so we look at all of those things and we use AI and we find activation energy. We had an idea last week that we killed because you know what? It didn't meet our principle. It sounded really fun, but you know what we were acting like, Lori? We were acting like those engineers who built something really cool that the customer doesn't want. And so, you know what we did? We killed it. And we're going to just keep building stuff that, really helps. So that's my advice to anybody listening to the podcast is don't just go build AI. Find your principle. Doesn't have to be mine. You can borrow my principle. It's totally fine. Or your own. And then go build stuff that helps people be amazing.
I love that because that is where we've gotten to. And I've run technology teams and worked with amazing teams across many industries. And that's one of the big downfalls is people come up with a solution. They think it's right because there's been a lot of time invested into it. But the truth is you now have, right? Like go to any ChatGPT, any LLM, you have your own like spot checker, researcher, validator that can take any of your ideas and expand upon them and give you insights and remove a lot of that hardship.
Right.
So as we kind of get to, I'd like to ask my last two questions for you. This is one, in 2 sentences, how would you describe what you think the future of work is going to look like?
Technology will enable humans to be both more efficient and more effective.
I love that. That's
One
beautiful.
sentence.
I like it. That is concise and beautiful. All right. And then, so to get to that future, then, right, we have to be thinking about, especially with your role, like what do you think are the 3 human skills? If people are, we all know change is happening, they're ready to kind of make some action steps. What are 3 human skills that you would be betting on that are going to be good for people to be focusing on?
Here's the first thing I tell people. So like I was speaking at like this AI type conference, a few months ago. Here's the first thing, and it's the most important thing. Be brave. That's the most important thing. Most people are not brave enough because you're afraid to fail. You'll look dumb. You're scared. What will people think about me? Will my boss fire me? And you can't think like that. You have to be brave. And then the very next thing that goes right with it, which is often a consequence of bravery, is embrace failure. The only way you're going to learn is to fail. And your company should celebrate failure. And that doesn't mean we can fail all the time. We're not saying that. So nobody think, oh yeah, it's just okay to fail. No, obviously you need to get there eventually. But if you don't fail along the way, you're probably not being brave enough.
Yes.
And then the third thing I would say that goes right after that is enjoy the journey. Do we care about the outcome? Of course we care about the outcome. But if we get to the outcome and we haven't enjoyed the journey, it's not that rewarding. And so be brave, embrace failure, and enjoy the journey.
Well, Robert, you are super inspirational and such a pleasure to talk with. And I think for our listeners, Robert's got some great experience, and clearly from your stories, true hands-on experience about what it's like to lead in a changing time. So we thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
If our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, where should we send them?
You can look me up on LinkedIn. Happy to chat with anybody there, connect, or whatever.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, everyone, for listening.